What's up, guys? Today I wanted to talk about one of my, actually, to be honest, I think this is my favorite movie of all time. Taegukgi 휘날리며, or as they've translated in English, Brotherhood of War. And often it's just also referred to as Taegukgi. But goodness gracious, this film is a masterpiece of cinema. And before we dive in, find this movie and watch it. Please, for the love of all that is holy, it's cinema. What more can I say? It's peak. It's very hard to find. If you do some research and digging, I'm sure you can find it though. This film came out all the way back in 2003, before Korean cinema had become internationally popular, so it's a very rare film, but it's incredible. It covers the Korean War and is by far the most riveting and sobering depiction of warfare that I've ever seen. And we're going to be doing a deep dive analysis of why it is so great. And there's going to be plenty of spoiler content, and I recommend you check it out. I think what makes the film most intense and thought-provoking is that all of it feels plausible given the history of the Korean War. And not just what happens in a lot of this conflict, it just portrays the degrading nature of combat and how war can tear apart and tear down anyone. It can tear down peoples, nations, whatever it may be. With that in mind, find this film, please check it out. And well, if you've already seen it or don't care about spoilers, but whatever it may be, we're gonna dive right into the film now. So to start off, much like in the film Saving Private Ryan, it begins in the present day. And you see an older character, and if you're not paying close attention, and then also if Korean's not your native language, I guess in a sense it leaves you in a little bit more suspense and wonder of who is this older gentleman here? Which character is he? Saving Private Ryan purposely leaves that suspense. You see the older character, and throughout the film it gives the impression that you're following Captain Miller. Turns out it's actually James Ryan. And this film, Brotherhood of War, does something pretty similar. It introduces an older gentleman, and he receives information that the government, as they're trying to excavate former battle sites, found content, and I believe through DNA tracing, that belonged to him, which he finds to be a bit confusing. And he thinks it might be his brother by chance. And thus, it's a little tricky to figure out which brother, especially with their names being similar, and that's just part of how Korean names often work. The opening syllable of a name is shared through family. So, with the names being Jin Tae and Jin Sok, it can be a little tricky to track which one was which and who's alive in the present day. And then the film, when it does go back in time, when it cuts to the past, it's so immersive in everything that happened in that time and the conflict, and it goes on and on and on, and there's no cutbacks to the present day, that by the time the film does come full circle to show you what's happening in the present day, much like in Saving Private Ryan, you honestly even forgot that was at the start. It's just that visceral. And so in that sense, as an international viewer, you can argue that you're in a little more suspense because you're not sure which brother is being portrayed, which one made it, which one's alive in the present day. If you listen closely in the Korean, I'm pretty sure that the granddaughter referred to, I think she said, 큰 할아버지, which means like older brother, grandpa. So in that sense, I guess if you speak Korean, you could probably tell, oh, so this must be the younger brother. But in the subtitle translation, I think it just says, oh, was it your brother? Was it grandpa's brother? Either way, especially once the prisoner building burns down, for me at least, the first time I watched this film, I just assumed that the younger brother had died in that fire and that the present day man was the older brother, Jin-tae. So then for me, when it's later revealed that Jin-suk actually didn't die in the fire, and then they meet each other on the battlefield on opposing sides, I was still in complete suspense of which of them was going to make it out of there alive, because I didn't know which brother was the older gentleman in the present day. I guess that's maybe just a unique experience to me, or maybe others, the international audience. I guess probably the Korean viewers didn't go through that as much, but yeah, it's just something that I experienced watching this film, and it really stands out to me. So the film shows Seoul in 1950, the summer before North Korea's impending invasion, and I must say, just the production must have been, wow. You can really tell that the folks that helmed this film were really committed to their craft. It's so immersive, and I wonder how difficult it was to put together all of these sets. Just thinking of the logistics of, this is a very long film, and almost everything is in camera. Must have been a ton of work. And getting historian consultants and making sure components of the portrayal of the war are historically accurate. A lot of work. And so this film it just jumps right in. It has a few minutes of setup and then boom, we're right off to the conflict. So it introduces the characters. We have the two brothers, Jin-tae and Jin-suk. The brother Jin-tae is working so his brother can go to school in the future, working just so hard as a cobbler. He's the main provider for their family since their father is no longer with them. Jin-suk is the younger brother who is seen as the future of the family, who's planning on going to school to lift them out of poverty. They have this one friend, Young-seok, school buddies of sorts with Jin-suk. And then Jin-tae is actually engaged to Young-shin, and they're going to be getting married in the fall. Even the little things in this film matter. This handkerchief here comes into play later on in the film, or the pen that Jin-tae gave to Jin-suk ends up being of vital importance later in the film. So much attention to detail. Young-shin also mentions that she recently joined a local community organization to help them receive more food. Something that just seems unimportant, but ends up playing an important role in things that come later down the line. And I like the portrayal of the family together. It almost feels meme worthy in that it's just so pitch perfect. Here they are hanging out, eating dinner, and then playing in the river. But it really needs to show things being just happy to really sell the drama and trauma that this entire peninsula experienced in one of the worst wars ever. And that begins abruptly within just a few minutes.
오늘 15일 미명 38선 전역에 북한 캐나다당이 불법 남침하였습니다. 이에 영맹문성 우리군은 불태전의 기상으로 북한 캐나다당에 대한 대대적인 반격전을 펼치고 있습니다. 우리 국민 여러분께서는 무역적 위험병에 현혹되는 일 없이 생업에 종사하시기 바랍니다.
And so with that, the family promptly find themselves as refugees, and then the two brothers are forcibly conscripted into South Korea's military.
환자입니다. 심장이 안 좋아서 운동도 제대로 못해. 엄마! 어머니! 금방 뒤따라갈 거니까 먼저 외삼촌 댁에 가겠어요.
And shortly thereafter, they find themselves on the front line of the Naktung River during the battles regarding the Busan perimeter. And this film does not hold anything back when it comes to the portrayal of war. It's realistic, brutal, gritty, and unapologetic. And then diving further into the wider implications of why the Korean War and civil wars in general are so awful is that at the end of the day, especially amongst the homogenous and ethnically homogenous population, civil war is little more than fratricide. Often in a war, if the enemy speaks another language, they look different from you, they have a different culture, it's a little easier to just get in your mindset that they're the enemy and we need to destroy them. But when a nation or people are fighting amongst themselves, when they speak the same language and they're the same people, the enemy is yourself. It's the worst kind of conflict. So they get their first introduction to being under artillery fire, and Jin Tae inquires from his commanding officer what he needs to do so that his brother can go home. He loves him that much, he wants him out of combat, out of danger. And the commander lets him know that if he distinguishes himself in combat, proves his worth, then his brother can go home. Jin Tae, hearing this, begins volunteering for dangerous combat missions, and when things are going horribly, while they're bogged down at the Naktung River, he comes up with the plan to launch an ambush, and again, goes out of his way to prove himself so that he can win the Medal of Honor, or whatever the equivalent of it is in Korea. In the subtitles, it translated as the Medal of Honor. That's what he is seeking. And much like in Breaking Bad, we see a character who is doing something that they say is for their family. Their family comes first. They're doing all these crazy things, but in truth, it's more of their own interests, ego, and pride that begins to surface. And it reaches the point where, while Jin Tae is doing this for his brother, he's also doing it for himself.
괜찮아? 무공 훈장 받아서 나 제대 지키려고 형하고 난 한 몸이야. 살아도 같이 살고 죽어도 같이 죽는 거야. 형 안 죽어 임마. 형! 나중에 쓰자. 나 지금 회식 가야 돼. 네가 대신 좀 써라. 어? 이따 보자. 아니 형!
all the things that I did. You need to understand.
I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was really I was alive.
So even though Jin-tae promised Jin
다시는
Sok
그러지
that
않겠다고 나오고
he
약속해.
wouldn't put himself in danger anymore, it's not the first time he'd be breaking a promise.
아직 멀었어. 그 구두 다 만들기 전에 형 안 죽어. 어서 가.
I think this film really demonstrates the term "war is a racket" by Smedley Butler. With the Korean War in particular, given how it ended, with no change in the status quo, it really goes to show that the Korean War was pointless. And this film immerses you in the conflict. It really shows the conduct of the war, and so many of this war is already overlooked internationally, and it really does a really good representation of the experiences that the Koreans went through on both sides. And it doesn't shy away from showing how inept and inexperienced the ROK soldiers were at the beginning of the conflict, and it also shows both sides committing war crimes. War really just brings out the worst of human beings. And all of this further contributes to the fraying of the relationship between Jin-tae and Jin-sok as the war. Jin-tae is just filled with vengeance and lets the war corrupt his soul. It even gets to the point where they meet back with their friend from their hometown. They come across him. He'd been forcibly conscripted into North Korea's army when Seoul was occupied.
데리고 가봐야 짐이야.
And Jin-tae
데리고 있던 용석이라고.
내 눈엔
Almost.
빨갱이 5놈만 보여.
decides right then and there to just put him in the ground.
얘기했잖아. 사살했다고 본대에 보고하겠어.
Jin-sok manages barely to convince Jin-tae to spare Young-sok's life, as well as these other North Korean prisoners. But ultimately it just delays their impending destruction. And at times Jin-tae begins to come to terms with that he's letting the war corrupt him, because Jin-sok in this scene here hops in the arena and just brutally demonstrates what Jin-tae is becoming. The crowd was laughing at the commies fighting each other back and forth, but the minute their friend was the one in the arena getting just the crap beaten out of him, they were silent. It sure is different when the person getting hurt is your pal, or worse, your own brother that you love dearly. And he takes a minute to think things through. He even uses Yongshin's handkerchief to treat his brother's wounds. I've seen this movie probably dozens of times, and I only just noticed that. Again, the little things matter so much in this film. As they reach the Chinese border, it seems all of Jin Tae's efforts were worth it. They were worth the price, because he finds out that he's going to receive the Medal of Honor, and thus Jin Seok will be able to go home. And the relationship, though still on difficult terms, seems to be coming back together.
넌 우리 가족 전부야. 내 꿈이고 없니 희망이야. 너 공부시키려고 학교 관두고 구두통 메고 다녀도 한 번도 후회한 적 없어. 미 해병대도 현재 퇴각 중입니다. 대체 얼마나 밀고 오길래 이렇게 호두갑이야? 운산 쪽으로만 10만 명으로 추산하는 것 같습니다. 우리 쪽으로도 곧 포격 시작될 것 같습니다.
Then, when the Chinese intervene and they're on the run, Jin Tae reverts back to his old self and just, I guess you could argue part of it was necessary. He had to save a comrade's life. Jin Tae did not need to kill Young Seok, but he did anyway. And again, the dynamic between the two brothers, I think it really embodies and mimics brotherly love, especially when boys are young. How often do young brothers fight each other, but then eventually forgive each other, and within a short amount of time? And they can never hide from the fact that deep down, even if they don't want to admit it, they have an endearing love for each other. And so, with the intervention of the Chinese communists, we find our heroes, so to speak, or merely just the side that we're following, on the run. And within a very short period of time, they're right back where they started, all the way back to the 38th parallel. They're given a little bit of R&R, so to speak, rest and recovery. Jin Tae is awarded his hard-earned Medal of Honor, and seems that all is well. Alas, they realize, and again, growing up since they were set in the Seoul area, they were, I imagine, pretty far removed from the more extreme actions that the South Korean government was taking even before the war began with the North Korean invasion, but things have escalated to 11. Any suspected dissidents are being terminated with extreme prejudice. And as was alluded to in the opening minutes of this film, Yongshin finds herself suspect of being sympathetic towards North Korea.
김영신이 같은 빨갱이 조지는 데지. 지금 뭔가 단단히 착각하는 모양인데 착각인지 아닌지 좀 있으면 알게 돼.
Jin Tae manages to find their location as he hears the executions taking place. Yongshin is called up to be executed like the rest, and then again with the little things that matter, Jin Seok uses the pen Jin Tae gave him to escape.
큰 짓 안 하는 게 좋아. 서로 다치지 않는 게 좋잖아. 어서 일어나. 진석이는
저 건물 끌려갔어.
어떻게 된 거야? 이들이 무슨 짓 하건 관심 없어.
Just before the war began, Yongxin signed up to join the Communist Party.
우리 쌀 준다길래 이름만 썼지. 난 보도연맹 뭔지도 몰라.
Jin Tae threatens to blow them all up if they don't let him escape with his fiancée, and then Jin Sok shows up, threatening pretty much the same thing.
지금 니들이 무슨 짓 하는지 알고 있어?
죄 없는 사람 빨갱이로 몰아 죽이는 건 막아야지. 어서 나가!
One of these folks erroneously accuses Yongxin of sleeping with the communist troops when they were in the area. And Jin Tae hesitates, doesn't know what to think. And that hesitation costs him everything.
상경 뭐해? 어서 데리고 나가! 어서! 거기서!
영신아 정신 차려. 정신 차려. 영신아. 영신아.
수건 아직 갖고 있어.
영신아. 영신아.
That whole scene right there is just so hard to get through every time. It's heartbreaking. And well, Jin Sok and Jin Tae are arrested and locked up. Jin Sok talks with this one commander who's investigating their supposed crimes and begs for his brother to be sent home. Even after losing his fiancée, he just wants his brother to be safe. But this commander's not having it. And when the Chinese close in on their position and mortar fire is coming down, the commander gives the order to burn the prisoners alive. Jin Tae runs out desperately trying to save Jin-seok, and it appears he's too late. Finds the pen amongst the ashes and understandably takes his rage out when he sees that commanding officer unsuspecting and unawares. Turns out Jin-seok actually survives, but all of this emotion sets things up perfectly that given everything that Jin-tae just went through, he fought, he worked so hard for his brother, his home, his fiancée, only for the very country that he'd been fighting for, it seemed they betrayed him. And thus, Jin-tae, in a phenomenal plot twist, joins the communists.
깃발부대에 무궁훈장까지 받은 국군 영웅이 빨갱이가 됐어. 우리에겐 치명적인 골칫거리지만 저놈들에겐 훌륭한 선전감이지.
At first, Jin-seok decides this is not his problem anymore. However, upon reading one of Jin-tae's letters that he wrote home, he thinks of their growing up and what his brother could still become if he could just find him and talk with him and make amends and help him realize that his sacrifices weren't for nothing. Thus, Jin-seok finds himself on the battlefield again. And I must say, as a older brother myself, anytime I watch this film, it makes me think of my younger brother and how much I care for him and what I would do for him. midst of battle, of course, Jin-tae doesn't recognize Jin-sok. And they're at odds, face to face on the battlefield, which is ultimately just symbolic of this war as a whole. The Korean people fighting amongst themselves. When Jin-tae realizes he's face to face with his brother, and it takes a bit, hot dang, these performances, you can just feel it. The acting is incredible. And as I alluded to earlier, Jin-tae breaks his promise again. He says he will see his brother again. He hasn't completed his brother's shoes. And that's why he will come back. And here we see that the film reveals that this was actually a lie. The shoes were already complete. And that's why when the older gentleman sees the shoes, he becomes super emotional. And as I noted, for me, since the first time I watched this film, I didn't know which brother the older gentleman was. When I saw him getting emotional with the shoes and learning later about Jin-tae being a cobbler, I thought, oh, perhaps this is Jin-tae and he's getting emotional at the sight of the shoes that he prepared for his brother. But alas, Jin-tae laid down his life so his younger brother could escape. And I don't know how anyone could not be moved by this film's finale. And again, much like in the film Saving Private Ryan, you've been so thoroughly immersed in the past that when it cuts to the present, you honestly forgot the movie started in the present day. And then again, bringing things back to the pen. The pen is how Jin-sok identified his brother's body. Perfect writing. Jin-sok reuniting with his brother at last as they find his grave, and a flashback to Jin-sok reuniting with his ill mother and Yongshin's younger siblings. Films do not get better than this, I must say.